Excited to start the morning with all of you. My name is Jonathan Muñoz-Proulx. My pronouns are he, him, and I am the Director of Cultural Programming at A Noise Within, where I serve on the artistic team. I've also been a producer in LA for 10 years, and I'm a freelance director. And I am thrilled to be joined this morning with my dear friends, Donna and Benjamin, and I'll pass it to them to introduce themselves. Donna, why don't you start?
So I'm Donna Simone Johnson. My pronouns are she, him. I am an actor, director, producer, and I'm also the co-artistic director of Watts Village Theater Company.
Welcome. Ben, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Ben Benet. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm currently an MFA playwriting candidate at the David Geffen Yale School of Drama, and also playwright of a piece called Alma, which is currently at the Kirk Douglas Theater as part of Center Theater Group.
Which I hope everyone gets the chance to see. I have not seen it yet, but I cannot wait. The photos look wonderful. So welcome, friends. We want to talk about your journeys and what it was like for you pursuing and landing where you are now. I think the three of us are having quite exciting moments as we land back from the pandemic. So I'd love to start just with maybe in a few minutes. What was your beginning, whether that means whether that started in college or graduate school or when you started getting hired, whatever that beginning and escalation felt like for you. Donna, tell us a bit about your journey.
Yeah, so before I can do that really quickly, Jonathan, I just want to say an honor to all the students here that I so commend you. I so commend you for the way that you were able to navigate and get through the last couple of years. I think that there's been a lot of, there have been accolades and a national support of a variety of demographics of people. I have not heard a lot about students. I cannot imagine having lost that time of the traditional high school experience. And then also as artists, I mean, how do you do movement on Zoom? How do you, I just want to say that the resilience of theater, the history of resilience is completely in you all. And I'm really excited about the work that you create because of this time. So
thank you so much. That is so real. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Donna.
So I'm an LA native, and I started acting very young. My mom was an actor. I did The Lion King at the Pantages a very, very long time, probably before a lot of you were born. So I should stop talking about it. But I stopped acting for a bit when I was in high school, did a little bit of theater, ended up going to undergrad not too far from here. But my mom, who I mentioned was an actress, became very sick in high school with breast cancer. And she passed away a week after I started college. And I made this big, huge declaration. I was never going to act again. And then I was in a play in college by like happenstance, but also a gift because I needed that to process. And I say this not in a good way, but I've said for years, the day that she died, I went to rehearsal because that was my family and that was my home. That was my healing place. And the director was like, do you need this today? And I was like, yeah. She's like, all right, let's go. Here we go. And so I ended up going to grad school then at Cal Arts, and then I went and got an MA in dance in NYU, came back to LA, and it's just been a winding road since then and a lot of ebbs and flows, but I can say I was always like, I'm in it. I had a mentor when I was very young who was like, it just slices in half. The people who have the drive rise to the top. Because everyone's talented, right? And a lot of us have the support, but it's who has that goal and that focus that by any means necessary, I will continue. I think that that's been part of my luck to end up here. So
fantastic. There's so many things I want to tease out and learn more about there. And Ben, what is your journey been?
Yeah. I mean, I think I've always been of the artistic persuasion. I remember like even in church as a 5-year-old doodling, as sermons were being given. If like they were talking about Noah's Ark, I was doodling Noah's Ark on my like little notepad, So I knew that I had a visual sensibility and that storytelling was something that was really important to me. Like I always wanted to go to the library for story time or whatever. But theater specifically became of interest in high school. There was a drama track as part of the arts program there. I went to Glen A. Wilson in Hacienda Heights, which is where I was born and raised. And it was the first time that I decided to do something because it looked like fun. I think before that, I was such a serious-minded person who was always thinking about the future, and drama just looked like people were having fun doing storytelling. So I was like, oh, I want to be part of that. And I really met my people in that circle, and decided to continue to do it into undergrad. I went to Cal State Fullerton. And there I sort of wore many hats. I started out as an actor, then I jumped to education, then I jumped to directing, ended up doing some playwriting concurrently. And I knew that theater was just like where I wanted to be. I just didn't know exactly what path as a theater maker that I wanted to take yet. And it wasn't until my father passed away in 2013, I was 25 at the time, that I got really serious about playwriting. And I did like a grind for 3 years where I was just like sending my work everywhere, reading lots of plays, reading interviews with playwrights so that I could learn what different paths other people had taken. And then I ended up getting a fellowship at the Playwrights Center in Minneapolis. And that was my first opportunity to do playwriting full time. I was a fellow for 2 years, and then I ended up going to grad school at Yale. And so I've been here now for the past 4 years, and I'm graduating in May. That's been the journey.
Fantastic. Wow. Wow. Really beautiful and powerful. You know, on my journey, I feel like I did a lot of being an artist, a whole lot of creating prior to it having anything to do with my career and making money. And I'd love to hear a bit from the two of you about what does that process of being an artist prior to it being your career, what did that look like for you? And what did practice and forming your taste look like for you? I'll just share briefly for me. I read a play every day for years because no one would hire me, and I wasn't really sure, well, how do I learn? So I saw theater and I read theater, and I just chose to sink my teeth in and chew it and love it and continue to fall more deeply in love with this work that nourished me. And I bring this up because I found that was sometimes the hardest period, because there can be a question of, are you really a blank if you aren't making money doing that? So I'd love to hear maybe from you first, Donna. Was there a period where you were doing this just for the love, and what did that look like, and how did you keep going?
Yeah, there was, when I came out of my undergrad, the years before I ended up in my graduate program, I was trying to figure out LA theater, and I always say that when other kids were at the movie on the weekend, I was down at the complex with $20, hoping to rush something, right? Like that was, for me, and I keep going back to community because that's what it really became for me and was for me. And there were a number of years where I was just looking to build a community that I connected with. And, we before GoFundMe was a thing, each of us would be like, great, let's go ahead, just like when we're selling cookies, let's go ahead and you raise 100 and you raise 100, we'll pull it together and see what we can do, and it just sort of happened that my work became about, and I didn't have the language at the time, liberation, that I was looking for the freedom and expression and chance to be myself without the walls that I was not getting in life, because I was very much grinding. At that point, I lost both my parents. So I was very much just trying to stay treading water at the very least. But I also was in a great place where people saw this and sort of threw, rafts to me. And a lot of the time was just learning, was like sitting and watching and learning and shadowing. And I shadowed, stage managers in 99 seat. And they were like, there's this kid here, and I'm not sure what she really wants, but she wants to be in this space. And I wasn't very clear that I wanted to be an actor or a choreographer or a producer or what. I just knew that I wanted to make theater, and I wanted to make theater that mattered to people like me, that looked like me. And coming into the LA theater scene, I didn't have access to that community. And so I was like, how can I take this from here, people who have the resources and the assets and the knowledge and the experience, and then apply that to my people? So we're producing Jean Genet's The Blacks, and we really only understood like 40% of it, right? But we got the heart of it, which was the liberation part of it. And I think that that feeling of freedom is what allowed me to sort of continue making that work. But it's also very much still a practice. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm closing a show today at the Geffen. I'm starting a new play Tuesday at Oregon Shakespeare Festival. And I still, with every final bow, feel like, what if I never work again? And that
Mm.
fear came true. And we can talk about March 2020. But even when I have a job lined up, I'm like, what if, right? This sense of like, what will I do? And it's the freedom of what I'm getting from now that allows me to say, you know what, it's going to be okay. I'm a little terrified. It's going to be okay. And I think it's an ongoing practice for sure.
That's wonderful. Ben, how about you? What did that chapter look like?
Yeah, I was living in Seattle primarily for that chapter. I think it was a few years of just like not knowing what I wanted to do or how to do it. Um, and then it became about a day job. It became about working admin, first for a nonprofit and then in the for-profit sector. Um, and then I think it became about, well, if I can't figure out what I want to do, how can I contribute to the things that other people are doing and that the art that they want to make? And maybe by virtue of doing that, figuring out what kind of art I actually want to be making and what projects that look like for myself could be. So I started out by like volunteering for like local theaters and doing dramaturgy work, doing work as just like a gopher who would like help set up spaces for events and things like that. Um, and I think again that became about like finding my people. And I started doing Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way for the first time.
Wow. Yes.
And I think that gave me like a sense of purpose and a sense of like, how can I find the thing that is exciting for me? I ended up taking like a playwriting class for the first time in many years at a place called Freehold and found other writers that I was excited about, found teachers who were excited about the work that I was creating. I joined a Playwrights group and then I was in like solidarity with some other people who were interested in writing and sharing pages and putting our work up on our feet, getting actors together to read our work. And it was just doing that for 3 years, just this grind of like, doing the 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, and then every evening being in the theater, and then every weekend being in the theater and going to see shows all the time, reading plays all the time, just being a sponge who was just like absorbing everything. And then I had a few breakthrough moments. Like I saw a touring production of The Suit, Peter Brook piece, and was like, oh, I think I'm really interested in this sort of like minimalist aesthetic that is like really about like being really intentional about like a few objects in space and really like this obsession with the human body and its innate theatricality. And I think that gave me a sense of direction as a writer that I was like, oh, I think, this sort of really making image an important component of the writing became important. I became like a collagist almost sort of obsessively and just collecting a lot of pictures that were exciting, words, phrases, quotes, all of this. And I just found that suddenly I had all of this raw material to turn into stories I was interested in telling and really found my voice as a playwright that way.
That's wonderful. But Donna, you had mentioned some opportunities, some luck. I'm wondering if any of that has to do with mentorship, with community. Could you tell us a little bit about, was there a person? I'm sure there were many people, but were there moments where a little bit of help opened some doors? I think certainly for me, it wasn't until people started saying yes to me that I had the chance to start practicing and failing over and over, but learning and building community who are invested in my growth. Because obviously, we're, like you said, it's still practice. I mean, I'm starting previews for my show right now, and I'm practicing. So I'd love to hear about, Donna, was there a person who was formative in a way?
Absolutely. I'm going to just say really quickly, if you see me mumbling, I've got a 5-year-old. I'm asking him to leave, but he wants to say hi for 2 seconds. I'm sorry. Say hi.
Hi.
Full train. Okay, now go. My life is chaos. To answer the question, there have been so many people, and I only because I've done a lot of these and I've seen a lot of these. I have no problem in saying I had a very rough childhood. and I was adopted, and I had a very rough childhood. And I think that there's both this vulnerable quality, this idea of like this person could break at any time, and also this like tough exterior that I think people understand one or the other and where it comes from. And the reason I say luck is I feel like I've just sort of been picked up along the way in my journey by so many people who have come at the right time. You know, when my mom passed away, I had someone step in and really not become my mom, but become a bit of a beacon of light, right? And then when I got out of school, there was someone else who sort of saw me, and I was just talking to my partner, mapping my career, and I'm like, isn't this insane that I'm here right now because of happenstance, this thing that happened 8 years ago? Like, if this had not happened at this time and this person had seen me, etc. I will just say that Eva Marie Johnson, I don't know how many of you know about CISA at CalArts, it's a summer arts program for students in California. There was a voice teacher there that saw me and said, you know, your experience is in your voice and it's all trapped. And we're going to spend our time together trying to get to the root of it. And it wasn't about the voice work. It was about reading books. It was about reading James Baldwin and Maya Angelou and these great visionaries who had come from difficult places and found a way to find their truth and their light and their pain and make it into art. I had another mentor at CalArts, Fran Bennett, who was also a teacher, and she recently passed away. And she took me on a walk one day and was like, you know, there's no joy or fire. And if you see me right now, I'm like this kind of energy. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm all joy and fire. And it wasn't coming through because of the walls that I created. And she's like, our goal here, the acting work is whatever. It's to pull your authentic self through these walls. And that took pain because you got to drill through that stuff, right? And that's really uncomfortable, especially as an artist. You're like, I do this thing really well. It's like, but you could do that. Like, well, but I can't. And why would I? Because you have to go through the wall to do it. And she helped to give me those tools because, you know, I was using a screwdriver and she's like, baby girl, there's a drill. It's easier than that, you know? And then Nataki Garrett as well, who I did not realize was watching me for so long. And I wasn't ready for so long. And she just showed up one day out of the blue and was like, I think you're ready now, you know, and invited me to come up to OSF in 2020. She's artistic director there. And that's three of, I could name, you know, a dozen people. I mean, even in the show I'm in right now with Amy Brenneman, who's amazing and so brilliant. She's a working actor and a mother. And she sat me down and basically was like, look, you're in rehearsals all night and you're leaving until November next, right? And this is the life. And that's the bottom line of it. And you right now, based on where you are in your career, you cannot have it all. You cannot have your kid with you all the time and be up here. I can't afford a nanny in the trailer over there yet, right? But you continue on this path like you are. In 5 or 7 years, you will. Right? Just you have to drill through this hole and just trust that what's on the other side is still going to be there at the end of it. You're not going to miss it. And if you see behind this wall, you will definitely.
That's right. And you are needed. And there are a lot of folks who want your voice and want to elevate and support and invest in your voice. And I think that trust, that faith that breakthrough is coming can be the hardest bit. Donna, you seem to me to be such a courageous, vibrant, alive person. And I acknowledge this because you seem like someone who would have no issue attracting community and finding mentorship. And I get asked by students all the time, how do I do that if I'm shy? How do I do that if I'm not comfortable talking to people one-on-one? Do you have any quick thoughts about how to build community, how to get someone to watch you or raise their hand for you when they don't have that? That's not natural for everyone.
I would actually love to hear Benjamin talk about this as well, because I think that without knowing you at all, like I feel like you are a lot more calm and collected and clear and rooted than I am sometimes. But I can say that I've lived a lot of my life in debilitating fear of these spaces, of imposter syndrome, of this feeling that I'm not worthy, I am not worth it. And I've had to put on a bravado and fake it until you make it. And that usually doesn't work for me. Usually it's actually taking a breath and looking someone in the eye like this and going to lunch and saying like, I'm trying to figure this out and I don't know what I'm doing.
Yes.
And sometimes I don't feel good in this space. I don't feel like I belong in this space. I had a hard time my first couple of years in graduate school. And my instinct was to turn off, was to be better than, and I'm over it and I'm not going to talk to you. And that's why I'm not participating. And it took a talk with friend Bennett to say, help, and because I was able to talk to someone that way, she saw me and noticed me, and helped other people to see me because they didn't before. So I feel like if you can find one safe pair of eyes just to breathe into, I have found that artists are open-hearted typically, and most of us, if not all, have felt raw and vulnerable in our careers and our life personally. And a lot of us come from some shaky places and find art that way, and that people want to see you as well. So
thank you so much, John. And Ben, I'm going to toss this to you in just a moment to get your thoughts on mentorship and how it showed up in your life. But I'll offer briefly that, sometimes I think mentorship gets bundled up with this idea of networking. And I think they're very, very different. And networking for me does not have that reverberation of community and relationship and nourishment. And I, especially when I was younger, I would meet with other directors who were more experienced than me all the time. And frequently they would ask me, so what do you want from me? So like, what are we meeting for? And I would be so surprised by that, because I didn't want anything other than an opportunity to meet and build relationship and be a part of the community. And it occurred to me one day that everyone else is meeting with these people to be their assistant or associate or say, will you be my mentor? And I was just looking for community and friends and maybe figures to ask questions to once a year. So I found that worked for me. And Ben, I wonder, what is your journey in that, Ben?
Yeah, totally. I think to piggyback off of what you're saying, like taking as much of an interest in someone else as they maybe take in you, I think is really important, or even showing interest where there is no interest in you is also important. Um, I think in terms of like mentors over the years, I think my first one was my very first playwriting teacher, Susan Merson. And she was the person who, um, when I was on the directing track, came up to me and said, you're a fine director. I think you're a writer. And I didn't believe her at the time, but then a few years later, I think I realized the same. And it just took me that time to figure that out. But I think in that moment, she had taken a lot of interest in me as a writer. It was she gave me my first opportunity to go to New York and work at Ensemble Studio Theater for a summer as a writer, and to like develop that voice a bit. So that was like a major moment for me in my playwriting journey. And I totally experienced imposter syndrome and was like, I'm so not a writer after doing that program. And I think that's why I stepped away from it for several years. And it wasn't until I met my next mentor, Rebecca Torino Collinsworth, also a playwriting teacher, who also was sort of like, I think you've got something really special as a writer. And she also took an interest in me. And I took an interest in her and read her plays while we were like working together. So I think it did become like a reciprocal relationship. We would go see theater together. Also, I would say that like both of those people introduced me to important plays and playwrights that became kind of like guiding lights. In my undergrad training, a lot of the canon had been like David Mamet, Neil LaBute, Shakespeare, these writers who, they were just like white men who had a very specific point of view that was like something that I was not quite as interested in. And I had a harder time trying to find myself in those voices and also find roles for like my friends who were women of color that I was like, I want to work with you all and give you roles. And I don't see those roles available in what we're doing in undergrad. So it wasn't until like Susan introduced me to like the work of Sarah Rule and Sarah Kane and Fornez that I was like, oh, here we go. Here's the stuff that actually makes me excited to be a writer. And I would say that like my current mentorship at Yale, Terrell Alvin McCraney and Irby, who are the co-chairs of our department, brought our program the task of reading Bell Hooks's All About Love. And that became like incredibly pivotal because I think it totally reshaped the way that I thought about our industry, because I think for so many years it had been about like, how do I get everybody's attention, right? How do I remind people that I exist? And it was just constantly feeling like I was being framed in competition with other people. And so I loved that when Terrell and Anne were like, read all about love. This is what being an artist is all about. It is about people. It is about taking an interest in people. It is about extending yourself for others. That is what your work should be doing. That is what you should be doing as a person moving through the world. And suddenly I was like, oh, right. Like, I had become so tunnel visioned about like, what do I want and how do I get it over the last decade of trying to become a playwright, that I had forgotten what was at the core of what I really wanted to be doing, which was like create roles for my friends, tell stories that feel important to me and that hopefully resonate with others. And so, yeah, I think those have been like three, legs in the journey that have really shaped me in a really meaningful way. But so much of it was about paying attention, taking interest, and being really observant.
Yeah, I hear both of you speak, and it just feels so like cozy and nurturing to hear you talk about this work, because there is a grind, it is hard, but it's illuminating for me that if you do what nourishes you, if you follow those impulses and lean into what brings you joy and fun with your people, then the work will come. It's sort of a magnet to that career, as opposed to creating, this is why I could not be an actor. I was for a time, but I wasn't inspired by that work, but I found directing. And I remember my version of what you all are sharing is a high school teacher said, you're a fine actor, but I think you're a much better director. And you should check out a play in the library called Angels in America. And that was, of course, extraordinarily formative and put me on a path towards magic and movement and play. Oh my goodness. So then we come to 2020, March 2020. Not that we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about March 2020, which was challenging for so many different reasons. But I want to bring it up to ask, how do the two of you feel we as an industry, or you as an artist, are emerging differently? Obviously, so many things have changed, but how has theater changed? I mean, I work, in the rehearsal room, but I also work behind the scenes in administration, and the way we make art and talk about art and hire and give voice to and fund and prioritize and uplift, everything is changing. If we're lucky, if we're talking to the right people. But I'd love to get your thoughts. Donna, how are you seeing this work and this industry differently?
In a strange turn of events, a lot of my experience, March 2020, really until now, November, 2021, when theater opened up again, has been about arts leadership. I became co-artistic director of Watts Village Theater Company in 2021, which I say so quickly, I want to emphasize it's based in Watts, right? That there's a theater company that's been there over 25 years that is simply and greatly serving South LA and South LA voices. And that's become so important to me. LA has gone through a lot of change, and is still very much in the cogs of that when it comes to addressing its own systemic racism and issues and structural issues, and we're on that path in the same way that the nation is when it comes to theater. And that all that sounds very lofty. And by that, I mean, like, it's time for us. It's time for BIPOC people and queer people to be advocates of our own liberation, because I think in the last couple of years, I realized, like, as it stands, I won't be free. Like, I might work and I might do really great work, but I don't know that I'm going to have the freedom to look at how race and prejudice and sexual orientation intersects with stories and be able to do so in a way that supports all of you all, the next generation of artists. Mm-hmm. And I think about what I saw when I was a child and on stage, what really meant the most to me. And it was about the stories, it was the people who looked like me and had very similar experiences as mine, that I said, oh, I didn't know that was actually a thing. I was looking at Romeo and Juliet, and as opposed to like Gail Orlando Smith's Yellow Man, which is about a woman trying to find herself in a world that does not see her. And the bigger she makes herself and the grander, the more imaginative and successful, the less they see her. And oh, sorry, I'm sort of, I saw an image of that play and got really lost just now. And that was in 2004. It still resonates with me now. Yeah. I have had the real pleasure of being in a show with some real giants of stage and screen, Power of Sale, and I had a very different quarantine experience that I'm a mom, and so I didn't get to do the baking of the bread and stuff, right? I was simply a full-time mom, which I've never been, and I did not sign up for. That was not the job that I said yes to. You know, there was no help or anything. My friends couldn't come and help. And I really lost myself, and I lost my sense of worth because I defined myself by what I was doing. You introduce yourself with the bio, right? And you say, this is why you should see me, a queer Black person, because I'm very important this way. And I didn't have any of that. And people, like, life moved on and theater did not. And we got lost in it. And people casually said, well, you know, in 1912, it took 7 years. So this is going to be a long one. And I'm like, you do know that's my livelihood. It's not just a hobby for me. So I came into this show stripped away, feeling very lost and trying really hard. I felt like I was a kid again, like I was 16 or 17 going to college again. And I do have a prop. It's over there. I'm not going to get it. Sorry. But in the rehearsal room, I just sat and took notes. And I was like, my process is old. I developed it when I was in college. It's stale. I haven't read these iconic books that by, you know, Uta Hagen and Stella Adler, The Art of Acting. I had gone towards these other esoteric ideas, but I didn't have a root system. So I started from scratch. And I have a notebook just full of observations. And this process has been so heart opening because I was able to stop and take a breath and have the courage to start over again. And that means starting way back at one and saying, I don't know anything about this industry or this art form or how to do it. Can someone please help me and teach me? Which was very hard to do in a room full of, you know, people like Bryan Cranston and Amy Brenneman. And I think it was that openness where people saw that open heart and said, well, we can work with that. And I say that not to be so prescriptive, but to say, try to keep that open, playful heart, because I'd forgotten how to play. And in that 2 years with my kid, without needing to be this other thing, I found it again, and I was lost in it. And it took a lot of courage to say I'm lost in it, but I embraced that fear because I had a little bit of space. And so, yes, if I had to summate this long monologue, I'd say, like, going to the play. Oh, I want to say, because I love All About Love as well. And All About Love helped me realize, because people say things like, let go of the fear and do what you love. And you're like, what does that mean? Like, what? I'm not afraid. What? And my approach now is like, whether I'm speaking in front of people in arts leadership or I'm on stage or auditioning for something, it's like, so baseline, this is what I love. You probably also love this art. I love this piece I'm doing, or you love this piece that I'm doing. I'm auditioning for a certain show. What I want to give you is my character's love and my love for this work. And I want to give it to you in love. And more often than not, they want to love you. And that's it. It's not, I'm going to show you, I'm going to prove to you, I'm going to love you and love this work. And I'm going to give it my best. I love this character, and whoof, there's the love. So that's what I've learned.
Profound to hear you put it in such words, Donna. And I didn't realize we had this connection, but my very first directing job ever over a decade ago was at Watts Village Theater Company at Watts Coffee House, site specific. I also just wrote down what you said. We can work with that because it's not about having the answers. It's not about perfection. It's not about really even knowing what's going to happen next. It's about having that heart and being that instrument to lean into community with love and invite people to say, we can work with that. And I'll share, for me, there is always fear, and not the type of fear that makes me shake and makes me sick, but there's always fear around creating and not knowing if this will work. And sometimes it doesn't work. I've done many things that do not work that I'm stuck with. But that's what our journey is. Ben, what is new? What has changed? How are you reemerging?
Yeah, I think I'm going to end up echoing a lot of what has been said, but I think the opportunity to slow down was really, really important. I think my life as an artist has been so much about like, what's the next thing? Where do I have to send the next application? Where do I need to submit at the right time in order to make sure that my work is reaching people at the moment they are usually wanting to receive it? And it was a lot of comparison. It was a lot of like, who's getting the opportunities that I, wanted for myself. It was so wonderful in a way for all of that to stop. Like all the noise just ceased. And in that silence, I was able to like really look at who am I when I'm not working? Like who is this person other than just an artist who is constantly grinding? And it was a difficult question. It was really hard to be like, what are the things that I enjoy doing just for fun? Because while I enjoy my art, certainly it had become such a big part of my identity and such an important part of my work that that suddenly I was like, I don't have hobbies. Like I like what do I do if I'm not making art? And so that was something that I really appreciated being able to like slow down and enjoy was like, what are things that I just get pleasure from just for fun? And so I like took up watercolor and was like painting every day. And that was just for me, right? And it was sort of like that led me back to like, I'm not the best reader in the world, but I love graphic novels. And there's like a really interesting interplay between the dialogue of a graphic novel and like a play script, right? But there's also pictures now, and how exciting that was to like really delve into the world of like the art of the graphic novel was something that I started doing. Um, I think really learning since no products were happening during that time necessarily unless you were doing like Zoom theater, um, really thinking about process and really enjoying process and really forming language around process rather than just like having some ultimate goal. That became like a focus within our program too, was like the playwrights just got together and we're like, none of us are feeling like writing really. Some of us were, most of us weren't. Nobody had productions. So we really just got together and said, what is feeding you right now? What are you reading? What are you like watching? What is your process looking like right now? So that was really like an important moment to like be like, let's all talk about our creative spaces. What are our rituals during the day that help us make things? Doesn't matter what we're making, just like what are the rituals around it, and getting to share that with other artists and also hear what other people's processes were and like try those things for myself to see if like, can this get me out of bed today? Was really like a beautiful moment of like going back to kindergarten with like show and tell, right? It was like everybody was just bringing in things and sharing on a really vulnerable and beautiful level. So for me, I think a lot of good came out of that moment, just in terms of like things are not are not ooh, what's the saying I want? They're not business as usual.
Right.
They can't be business as usual. And I think I really appreciate people now who have accepted that the world has completely changed and are shifting, to rather than doing a six-day work week, moving to 5, no more 10 out of 12s. Like I'm loving the shift in the industry that I'm seeing, where it's like, let's not grind anymore. Like we have been grinding for so long. How do we rest? How do we make rest and time to be people outside of our artwork a priority now?
Thank you so much. For our audience, I want to invite you to start thinking about any questions you have for our panelists here. Feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll respond to as many as we can. I'm loving this shift in the industry that is less about grind, and I think the hard part I feel around that is it's great that the theater that's employing me isn't requiring me to grind. I have a hard time letting go of the grind myself. And I think you're reminding me, Ben, we are our instruments. We have to be well. We really have to be well. And that is a big part of the work. And that's becoming a bigger part of the work for me now as I look for that nourishment. And, for me, it is other types of art, whether it's opera or classical music or visual art or nature or community, whatever, looking for the ways to show up the fullest and the most playful and the most ready before the pandemic, I was fortunate to be doing 7 to 9 shows a year as a director. But I was really wondering, are these all going to be my best work? Because I don't know that it's possible really to be that creative all the time. It's the tank does run out. I just want to shift us a moment and ask the two of you, what are you looking forward to in this, I'm going to say, next chapter of theater, or even next generation of theater makers, whether that is our generation, whether that is the generation coming after us on the other side of the screen, whatever that means to you, what are you looking forward to in the future in this industry? And I'm just going to pause for a moment for you to marinate on that and let one of you be brave and share what's popping.
I feel like I've gone first thus far, so.
Yeah, I can totally jump in. Well, you know what? The first thing that sprung to mind for me, I mean, I've been thinking a lot about what type of plays I've been seeing. And so much of it has been about, and I think this is like borrowing from bell hooks too, right? So many of the stories that are popular are so rooted in like violence and so interested in like perpetuating and just showing violence over and over and over again. And when I think about like the work that's being created around me by my peers, so much of it is about like, how do we tell stories about love and like acknowledging we live in a violent world and in a world where like there's a lot of struggle and pain. But how do people move through that? And how do we like show characters that are multidimensional and acknowledge like the full humanity of the people that we're putting on stage? And I should also like say that right now the playwriting program at Yale is all people of color for the first time in its history, all 9 of us, which is an amazing thing. So what I'm excited about is when their plays are the ones that I'm seeing on stages across the country, where it's like stories about people of color, but they're coming from this place of like, how do we tell love stories and how do we show the full humanity of these characters on stage in a way that I think we haven't had enough of in the past.
Thank you.
I love, yeah. I'm chewing on that because it's really at the nucleus of my work, you know, is watching and encouraging and helping to nourish the next voices in the way that I was. And I don't want to wait until, you know, I'm 55 on some huge platform to do it. I'm trying to figure out how to do it now, which is why I love these kinds of conversations. Gosh, I am so interested in what I see is that this upcoming generation, they are they're presenting ideas. I think that I'm speaking very generally. I think that when I was growing up, it really seemed like we were trying to answer the questions, which I think requires a lot of this, right? And I think the other generation, the older theater makers, they were both posing the question, but a lot of them were also stating their knowledge, right? So there was no real curiosity. So we're just trying to do this to answer. And I feel like from what I've seen, not to pander, but I am a little older, what I've seen like on TikTok and social media and looking at, articles written by people who are lots younger than I am on Medium, that there are a lot of ideas presented and they're open. There's no answer to them, right? Like what happens if we, instead of looking, because my generation's saying decolonize the canon, and they're like, what happens if we like gesture towards the canon, but also we decide to bring in what I've learned about plants, and also we decide to play as kids? What happens if? And I'm like, oh, I've never even considered that because I was so busy trying to answer the question.
Right.
I'm excited to see Indigenous stories. I'm excited to see queer stories. And I don't mean like let's have a Romeo and Romeo, right? I mean like let's unpack the experiences. I want to see a play about a queer trans actor trying to be a queer trans actor in the world that us millennials have created, right? Like I want to see that push. And I feel because of things like TikTok, where you can be 17, 18, 15, whatever, and see a variety of different experiences from around the country or world in a way that we didn't have access to. The internet came a little bit later and it wasn't like that. It was our immediate community. But you can say, I know an Indigenous person who lives in London, right? And I know their experience because I'm with them. I'm heart space with them. That then can't help but inform our work and our being. And so it's that sort of larger scope of ideas. I just can't wait to see it on the stage. I get excited as a teacher. I taught at a conservatory. I get excited in the room when I see my students unpack these things. I am blown away, and you can tell I'm very expressive. And I'm just like, wow, how do you do that? How do you come in the room in the beginning with liberation, so open, so free? I'm in awe.
Yes, there's, I wish we had more than 3 minutes left, because there's so much in all of this that I just want to lean into. Yes. I'm going to try to get to maybe one, maybe two, if we're brief, questions from our audience. Daniela asks, was it scary pursuing a career where you knew you could possibly fail? Like scared it would just be a dream and nothing else? And I can say it was scary for me. It was 7 years of a day job wondering if I am ever going to shift that seesaw to the arts. Now that it's happened, it seems like a no-brainer. Now we know all that equals this, but it's hard not knowing. Can someone jump in and add to that?
I can, just really brief because of time. Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes it's still that feeling, right? Even as I'm working, this idea of what if this flops? What if this sounds silly? What if the reviews are bad and no one wants to hire me anymore? I mean, all of these things are always at the forefront. But for me, I really decided, and I continue to decide, I will not fail. I will redefine what success means for me, and I will stand in that pride, but I cannot, because I live with the joy and the passion and the love. And I know for a fact that's what people want. That's what you want in the stories you see, in the rooms you're in your boardrooms, in your classes. You want that love, and I've got that. So if they don't want to receive that, then boo, I don't want to work with you anyway.
And anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think too, when thinking about a career, I think it was the scariest when I was imagining things for myself that were so far into the future. You know, like, a silly example, but there was a time when I was like, I want to win the Pulitzer Prize for drama, and I hadn't even written a play yet. You know what I mean? So I think when it's very scary. But when it's like, I'm in a playwriting group, I'm writing plays, I'm getting to hear words spoken by actors, like, that is so nourishing in and of itself, like just the doing of the work, that like suddenly I wasn't thinking about a Pulitzer Prize anymore. Like, that didn't matter. I wasn't comparing myself to that anymore. It was sort of like, I'm just doing the work and enjoying this moment of being in it and doing it. So I think the fear starts to dissipate a bit when it's really about just doing the thing and doing, like, what is the next step on this journey, rather than thinking about, like, do I have to be the best at this, like the best playwright ever? That's scary if I'm trying to, because like, what does that even mean, right?
Yeah, and maybe impossible. So
I am going to say, I know that we're at time. I'm just going to say to Daniela, you're going to fail. You're going to fail a lot.
yes.
You're going to drop so many balls. You're going to mess up so many times. You're going to hit so many walls. And then you have to have the courage to say, I failed. What did I do? What have I done? Is this a theme for me? And what can I do better? And you can do that at any point in your career, or even as a student, you can do that, right? Like, what are my habits? How is this transferring to my art? I can say I didn't show up in chemistry, and I paid for it later in acting school when it came to discipline. So all of these threads are still present right now. So just know you're going to fail, and that there's freedom in that alone.
That's right. And build a relationship to your art where you are nourished on the journey. Because if you're only going to like your art and like being an artist when you have XYZ, the Pulitzer, the Tony, whatever it might be, there's going to be a lot of choosing to suffer. So build a relationship that maybe includes a day job, and also includes watercolor painting, and also includes going to the symphony and building plays in your living room with your friends. Build a relationship to the work that you can enjoy on the journey. This has been so lovely. I have so much more I want to talk to you both about, but this has been so nourishing. And thank you to everyone for watching from home and your great comments and questions. What a wonderful day to start the day. I'm going to go off and see my first preview of Anne in the Tropics and Noise Within. And I just feel nourished, launched by this on-ramp of just a bed of creative love. So thank you all. Thanks to everyone watching. Have a wonderful day and go create and be well. Bye now.